Okay, now you've jinxed us. We're probably.
Start saying a lot of them come in like, man, it usually gets you later and gets you early. It'd be easier.
So many tools. Now I'm coming back here.
Yeah, so you're going to be all set for next year to do the presentation.
Oh, absolutely.
I sent you an email. Yeah, I sent you an email with February, March, April, May.
And I answered that.
You just said. Yes. Okay, I'll put you down for February. Yeah, check your email that you sent me. I didn't get it. If it's another date, just let me know. I got January's done. So I got February, March, April, May, you know.
Okay, I'll check that and just follow back up with you on it.
Yeah.
How are y'all doing today?
First Friday in February.
Okay, perfect.
I know I'm going to Disney the week after.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. As always, we want to start this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if y'all will stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of
The United States
of America, to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty,
justice for all. All right, so Frank.
Yes, sir.
That name was
That's
slipping
okay.
my mind. So we have Frank here. I believe the name of your presentation is Pause.
That's part of it.
That's part of it. So, some of you may have heard of this presentation or seen parts of it. I was not able to attend the governor's conference, but I understand that you presented there. So I look forward to seeing this as well. But welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you,
And
sir.
with that, I'll turn it over to Frank.
If you have had the opportunity to see this either at the Alabama Governor Safety Conference or at a previous meeting, ABC, or even one previous ASSP meeting a while back.
Good while back.
Tweaked it a bit, so there's some additional and some new information here that hopefully you'll find helpful. But let's dive in. You know, there is indeed a reoccurring thing. I guess my question to this group today is to just listen through this. I want to begin the thought process with some war stories, if you will. New school's about to open any day now. An experienced electrician guy is working on an energized electrical outlet, you know, pushing hard. The community needs the school, the elementary school, you know, and school's about to start in just a few days. And as a result, one of the guys there loses his life. New crew comes on board. A worker dies when he becomes entangled in moving parts during a routine morning equipment check. The old crew, complex operation, the old crew that had been trained by the equipment manufacturer as to how to use this equipment safely is gone. New crews come on board. And shortly thereafter, this tragedy occurs. End of the day, it's time to go home. Worker steps in to help another crew finish up and falls to his death. It's the end of the day, you know, this guy's a good guy, he's a team player. He sees that he's packed his tool away, but he sees that some of the people, a matter of fact, some of the people that he carpools with are still working, trying to finish up an activity. So he jumps in to help them. Moments later, he's lost his life. Supervisor, competent person's running late this particular time. Crew gets started on this very hazardous activity before their supervision arrives. As a matter of fact, an activity that normally has a 6-person crew, and in this case, because of the supervisor and competent person not being there now, it's a 4-man crew. shortly, very shortly thereafter, after they begin this activity, 3 of the 4 have lost their lives. And then lastly, this activity has been performed on site hundreds of times. But in this particular setting, crew roles are reassigned. 1 person dies. All real world situations, and we could go on, all situations that I've been called to investigate, and all situations that we could look at a lot of things that possibly were precursors to these, but I want to drill in on a few things today to hopefully spark some discussion. I did put one more up there. I'm sorry. Hurry up. Poor 2I has to come down and a mason falls to his death from the scaffold. Rework. You know, having to hurry up and tear something down in a construction schedule that's already tight. You don't have a lot of room for error. Now that error occurs and you jump into it with minimal planning. So probably familiar with this model. Any of you that are a student of Sidney Decker or Todd Conklin or some of the others probably have seen this. This line represents the worker's plan. This line represents, okay, we're going to start at point A and then B and then C and then D. We have this nice linear model in our mind as to how the work's going to go. This line represents the actual work as performed. It begins just as planned and for a short period of time proceeds as planned. Then we deviate from it. And we deviate from the plan and nothing happens, so that becomes the new norm. We deviate a little further, nothing happens, that becomes the new norm, et cetera, and we continue. This line represents the hazards that are present in the workplace. And then ultimately, when the work as performed intersects with the hazards, that's when we have a mishap. That's when something happens, okay? Now, what we tend to focus on a lot of times when we use this illustration, and even in some textbooks where it's published, is we focus on this gap between work is planned and work is performed. How did we get so far from the plan? That's one of the first things that's asked with any incident investigation. You know, you gather the troops and you'll start discussing what happened and digging into the situation. And one of the first things is, how did we get here? Well, what I want to do today is focus on a different gap. I want to focus on this gap to here. Focus on work as planned and the hazards that are present on the job. Because you see, what I've determined, and it's not a thought unique to me by any stretch, but from having the opportunity to bounce around the world and investigate tragedies as they've occurred on construction sites over the years, is that Murphy's wrong, okay? We're all familiar with Murphy's Law, you know, and anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Well, the reality is, in my work environment, at least in the construction world, what can go wrong usually goes right. And that's part of the problem, okay? So how does that occur? An autopsy, I titled this, Incident Autopsies and Lessons Learned. I think it's good to actually look at and think about the definition of an autopsy as it relates to our incident investigations, because too often we don't do this. Medically, the purpose of an autopsy is twofold. Number one, to evaluate the presence and extent of disease. Okay, we do that in our incident investigations. We evaluate the presence of what went wrong, okay? Evaluate the effectiveness of therapeutic procedures. Okay, I can say that we do that as well, but look at this last statement. For the benefit of the future practice of medicine. When we do our incident investigations, do we really zero in on what are the elements that we uncover that really could improve what we're doing in the future? You know, I think too often we see these newsletters that come out month after month after month, and the heading of the newsletter says lessons learned. Okay, I get one from a particular vendor that I won't mention, but that's the title of the newsletter, lessons learned, and it has case studies of various incidents from around the world. I could take this month's lessons learned and lay it against September of last year or September of 10 years ago, and guess what? Very similar. Are these lessons really learned? You know, I challenge us that perhaps they're not. And part of our challenge is when we have an incident, we have this hindsight bias, this retrospective understanding of the incident. And we can look back on it, we can say, you know, behind closed doors, when we're sitting down with our supervision, how could our best trained guy or gal have done something so stupid? Ever heard that? You betcha, we all have. Okay, because we have this perspective looking back on exactly what happened. Well, our employee did not have that advantage. We have to, if we're going to be successful in this, if we're going to really learn and improve, we have to try to, and it's hard to do, folks, we have to try to approach our incidents as recreating the mindset of our employee pre-mishap. You know, what caused them to make the decisions that they made at the time without the benefit of knowing the outcome like we do now? It's a challenge, hard to do, but that's what we've got to try to focus on. Some food for thought. You know, I put up here, you know, 10 years of life-changing and fatal. What I based this, and we mentioned the PAUSE program, and I'll get to that in just a moment. As I went back and looked over the last decade in our company, and for those I may not know, the job title is Corporate Vice President, Safety and Health with BL Harbor International. We're a large international general contractor. We work literally all over the world. Currently have direct hire employees, not our subcontracting partners, about 11,000 employees. We'll hit somewhere in the range of about 25 million direct hire man hours this year worldwide. So that's kind of who we are, a diverse general contractor that works all over the world. And I went back and I looked, 10 years of significant incidents that were a fatality occurred or a life-altering injury occurred, pulled all the paperwork out, pulled all the information out, the ones that I investigated as well as others. And were there any reoccurring themes? Are there any pearls in there that perhaps could have given us an indication that something was about to happen? Okay, that's the focus that I really want to have. The reason I put that slide up there, that photograph up there, you of course recognize rumble strips on the side of a roadway. I love this illustration, and I borrow it from Todd Conklin from a couple of his books. And Todd knows that I use this in my presentations frequently. Rumble strips are perhaps the most effective safety device, or at least one of the most effective safety devices ever. And I want you to think about this from the standpoint of your own operations. You see rumble strips, number one, they're designed in, they're part of the roadway, they're ever present. Number two is as long as the driver is functioning as the road was designed, you don't even know they're there. But when the driver starts to deviate from how the road was designed, the rumble strip engages and does what? It warns them to give them the opportunity to get back on course before an incident happens. It's the perfect safety device. It's always there, it's ever present. It engages the driver and gives them an opportunity to make a correction before something happens. What are your rumble strips in your operation? What are the things that are present in your operation that allow your people to work in that gap? They're not performing an activity exactly as planned, yet nothing's happened yet. What are the things that create the guardrails? What are the things that are the rumble strips in your operation? And isn't that the things we should be strengthening those? Okay. I've got up here, one of the things, and I would suggest you do this sometime at a safety meeting. Don't do it all the time because it will become old hat. But sometime when you have your crew together, I love to do this toolbox meeting at construction sites periodically. Pass out cards to everybody, give everybody a pencil, and ask them to answer 2 questions. Don't give them time to really think about it because they'll start talking to one another. You know, you want their knee-jerk response. Ask them 2 questions. Number 1, where will our next mishap occur? And number 2, what activity? So what on this construction site or what in this place of it, what right now, where is the next guy or gal going to get hurt? What are they going to be doing when that happens? Take the cards back up and believe me, you'll have some of the most powerful information about your workplace that you've ever gathered in that length of time. Your guys and gals know. They know. They have their finger on the pulse. And let them turn that in anonymously. You know, you're not interested in names when it comes to this. You'll find that to be a lot more effective than any checklist. I've got up here things that should make you go, And the reason I put this up here is, again, my objective today, I'm going to give you the 5 elements of our policy. But I want you to carry away from this to think about your own incident investigations and your own situations that occur in your workplace. And do these things really shape your thinking or not? These are just some quotes I pulled from various texts and from employees. People normally want to do a good job. Do you believe that? I think it's true. Okay, that normally people want to do a good job. Okay, think about this one. People are fallible. Even our best make mistakes, take risks, and drift. Even our best make mistakes, take risks, and drift. Okay? How can our best trained guy have done something so stupid? Okay. Does it happen? You bet you it does. People normally do what makes sense to them at the moment in the context of their work. Again, recreating that situation, that environment pre-incident. You believe me? Mishaps can be prevented. I love this. Mishaps can be prevented when we learn from the events that we can improve. Mishaps can be prevented when we learn that's not where the period is. When we learn from events, that's not where the period is. When we actually learn from events that we can improve. So if our people are naturally risk takers, if our people are naturally fallible, if they're human beings, if we can identify the rumble strips and improve on those things, what's the impact that potentially we could have? People are as safe as they need to be without being overly safe in order to get the job done. Boy, that fits the construction world to a T. I just did a lengthy blog internally within our company on that very topic. Blame is the enemy of understanding. Success comes from making it easier to do the right thing, harder to do the wrong thing. And boy, think about this next time you're writing a policy or procedure as a result of an incident investigation. Violations of rules and procedures are very rarely malicious, but normally are well-intended behaviors to get the job done. Do you believe all that? If you can look down that list and believe that for the most part, those things are true, then I encourage you to carry away from this discussion today that why, when something happens, do we sit down and do our investigation, and our corrective actions are to blame and retrain and discipline our employees if we believe this. Now, there's a time and place for training, and there's a time and place for discipline. I get it. But why is that our knee jerk? It's low hanging fruit. It's easy. If we really believe this and we want to improve, okay, did a 10-year study. And what we came up with, well, a study of 10 years of incidents. And what we did come up with, and this is not bulletproof, this is what we found looking at our mishaps. It may not work in your workplace. So what I want you to do today is not try to apply these 5 elements to the workplace. What I would prefer you do is take this thought process back and look at what happens in your workplace and dig into it and see if you can determine what your own rumble strips are. Okay, but these are 5 we came up with, and my marketing team that's much more creative than me came up with the acronym PAUSE, P-A-U-S-E, because I told them, I said, I can't go on a construction site unless I want to make a bunch of enemies and tell them, look, you got to stop. I don't want to use the word stop because I'm going to make every superintendent mad at me as soon as I tell them I just delayed their job. So we came up with PAUSE. It's a little friendlier, okay? And they were able to tie each of these 5 elements to those 4. So let's look at it. The P, there we go. The P in PAUSE, okay? What we came up with was is a personnel change, a significant personnel change. Now, let me, again, I know there's a continual turnover, and especially on a construction site. But what I'm talking about here, the team, well, like for instance, when we're awarded a project, one of the first triggers that we will pull, we're awarded a new project, we'll assign the project manager and the project superintendent. If it's a design build, some engineering support, things of that nature. But nevertheless, there's a core group of people assigned to that project in its infancy. And that core group of people develops the emergency action plan and the site utilization plan. They do all that pre-planning before a shovel ever hits the ground. What happens when they're gone? When the people that had ownership of that plan are no longer affiliated with it. I'll tell you what happens is I walk on the job site and I start talking about their emergency action plan, and I get a bunch of deer in the headlights look because they have no clue what I'm talking about. They no longer have ownership of that plan. Okay, so that's number 1. P in the PAUSE. Has there been a significant personnel change of the people that had ownership of that project? Number 2, any time crunch. Oh, come on, Frank. Every construction project's in a time crunch. Okay, let me clarify. Okay, case in point, actual job site. They sequence the job to go in a particular direction. It's using these very, very large prefabricated wall forms, okay, tilt-up construction. Material arrives on site only to find out that they're moving toward an area of contaminated soil. Stop, have to rethink everything, so they start sequencing the job from the other end of the job site while they're recovering from that situation. All that material rolls in. All these wall panels that are staged for that end. They hit another issue with site conditions. Stop, so they resequence the job from a 3rd direction. All that material comes rolling in. So this job site that was designed to hold staged material for 1 sequence, there's now staged materials for 3 different approaches to this job piled on this job site. You can't move anywhere. There's extra material stored there. These are huge wall panels stored everywhere. It pours down rain. The ground becomes soggy and unstable. Series of wall panels fall like dominoes, crushing workers. A crunch in the schedule from unplanned events, unanticipated events. If you see that red flag, unplanned work, it's important to stay nimble and sticking to the plan, of course, if we can, but unplanned work, and where we see this frequently, and it ties very closely to the next point, is in rework. But do we find ourselves in a situation where we're tackling an activity that we haven't really thought through? And we have tools that, if you're in the government construction world, you're familiar with the acronym AHA, Activity Hazard Analysis, Job Safety Analysis, whatever your acronym is. Is it an exercise in pencil whipping, or is it actually pre-planning an activity? Okay. S, substantial rework. I've already mentioned the fact, the construction prior, I remember years ago when we could actually identify which one of our projects were quote fast track projects and on a fast schedule. Now they all are. Okay. And substantial, there's hardly enough budget and time to build something once. When you start having to tear it out and build it the second time, you got problems. So what do we do too often? We pull people from various crews, we throw resource at a rework situation, and we go into it haphazardly, poorly planned. Work-related injuries skyrocket in those situations. Lastly, E, an equipment and training mismatch. Do we have guys and gals out there using tools and equipment that they haven't been trained to use? Or are they in activities that they haven't been trained regarding the activities, specific hazards? So that in a nutshell is our pause. Now, what we've done with this, once we identified, and these were real world rumble strips for us. When someone loses their life on the job and we start looking one or more of these over and over and over again of being very prevalent on that job site. This is real world stuff. This is not theoretical for us, for our operations. Okay. So what have we done about it? Well, I can't really report back to you successes at this point. It's still in its infancy. Okay. But we've rolled it out company-wide. And with the emphasis on pause, not stop. Mr. or Mrs. Superintendent or project manager, if you see these things present on your job site, just call a timeout, address them, take care of it. I'm not saying shut the job down and lock the gate, okay? But take care of these situations. And what we've done, we've got this signage that goes out to all the job sites and training materials to support. I mean, you'll see a QR code by each of those. That links to a very brief training video on each of these topics so that on the job site, the employee or the supervisor can take their iPad or their phone and hit that QR code and see a brief explanation of each one of those in English and Spanish on each of those topics. Of course, the corresponding Spanish signage is in the process of being developed now. So a couple of quotes to wrap up. Workers are normally strive to be safe enough without being too safe. We mentioned that one. The ultimate goal of an investigation is to learn from failure. The last thing I'll say before I sit down and hush is, isn't it interesting in our industry as safety professionals? And I don't know too many other industries professions that do this, but everything that we measure our performance by is how frequently and how severely we fail. Incident rates, loss runs, EMRs, take your pick, is all a measurement of the frequency and the severity of failure. I want to shift that mindset. I challenge you to go back into your operations, determine what your rumble strips are, determine what allows your guys and gals to work safely every day. Measure those things, because remember, what gets measured gets done. Measure those things, track those things, strengthen those controls that each and every day helps keep your folks safe. So that's the crux of our pause program. Put my contact information on there. If anybody wants to follow up with me, you're more than welcome to do so. But comments? That's a half-day seminar crammed into about 20 or 25 minutes. Yes, sir.
Hey, Randall Arms here with Blackline Safety. First of all, this is incredible. The we put together here.
Thank you.
As like you said, the rumble strips, keeping things inside and not having to chase, as they say. Question I have is, as far as when you get to a point, or when you get a job project that gets to a point of, say, personnel change, I assume that Bill Herbert has a documented process to make that change. Is your program an inherent part of that? So it's not it's not something that's out there on a poster, but it's actually something that, hey, we've documented it. It's part of that pause program. And we're documenting the steps that look at that.
Yeah, your spot, that absolutely is important. In case you couldn't hear, for those that are online, the question was, for instance, when a personnel changes occurs, is there a trigger within, say, our HR system when a new supervisor comes on the job site to trigger this red flag? Right now, today, no. Again, programs in its infancy, where that's in process. That's coming. But yeah, I mean, again, one of the things we all struggle with as safety professionals is we tend sometimes to operate in our own little silo. And becoming fully integrated into operations is critical. And it's one of the challenges we all face as safety professionals. So thank you for that comment. And we're not there today, but it's forthcoming. Yes, sir.
I agree. I mean, it's just, I like the way that you've kind of narrowed it down to those items, those 5 items. That makes it easier to see.
Yes.
Rather than having to look at a whole bunch of stuff. So you're saying that during those 10 years, you had incidents that pointed to those items.
Yes.
Those were the one that stood out.
Yeah. What we found, and what we're guilty of just as much as anyone else, is when it comes to corrective actions, we'll go for the low hanging fruit. You know, when it comes to corrective actions, we'll implement the things that sadly most companies quickly do. But what I wanted to do is we've done a really good job of incident investigations, good root cause analysis. I wanted to dig into that and see if there was any reoccurring themes, and these are the things that are. Absolutely. So it's already, I've already had, I can think of one job site here in the US that I had a project manager, a project superintendent contact me and said that he had noticed a couple of these things were present in his job site and they wanted to pause and address those things. So at least in that case, perhaps, again, here we go again with the challenges we have as safety professionals is how do you quantify the value of that incident that never happened? You know, that return on investment of something that never occurred as part of our challenge in the field that we're in, but maybe we saved a life in that situation. So other comments, of course, appreciate the feedback.
I really like, pause. I've been in safety and health now for many years and so many times, and I'm guilty of it myself. We talk about stop work and stop work authority. And the way you just introduced pause is so critical because even in my current role, we've been using the word stop and stop work authority, but we add on to that look, the point of this is to stop long enough to evaluate the situation. So we're sending that same message, but we send right up front that negative, we're just going to stop work. And pause is just so much better.
As soon as you say that, all the defenses go up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I like it.
Thank you. Don't see any other hands. Don't think we've got any comments from anybody that might be online. So thank you. Yes, sir.
Can we share this information?
Oh, absolutely. Please do. Please do. Feel free to push it out. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
I've got a copy of the PowerPoint. We can.
Yes, sir.
Also,
Yes, sir. Thanks again, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, you want to, you want to go into the lunch part and then just discuss chapter information? All right, so we do have lunches here, so feel free, grab a lunch, fix you a glass of tea. Sit back down if you want. We're gonna discuss a little bit of chapter information and a little bit of detail and discussion around that. If you want to stay, if you've got something else going on and you need to leave, that's fine too. But feel free to hang around. We've got this room for plenty of time, don't we? So I'll let everybody come grab a lunch, and I think there's three I think there's turkey, ham, and some chicken salad. So turkey's on the left, ham's in the middle, and then chicken salad. So help yourself.
Thank you. Run out.
Oh, that's all right. Oh, that's all right. Probably enough there. You might get another one.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. Help yourself. So. Didn't notice any green on there before, but. I don't know. Could put. Unbelievable. But we were buying things, so it offset. Over is to be good.
Right out.
Sign up too.
You all agree with this resolution now that you've seen it, what, 3 times? So some variation of it. So if you fix those, you can only have 25 people. That is more likely to be.
For whatever reason, it's reverse. But, and I think Southwest chapter. And we want to seem to be working. It's a gamble though, right? You say you want to get over 100 people and stuff. I don't know the right answer. It's there's, you know, the last, and I'll share some of this in a minute, but the flies that we had down there, the house, we probably had.
I heard some pieces of it, they didn't get any pictures, but you saw in the newsletter, we had a picture of it, State Car.
And I will sit down. I'd love to. just kind of pick this-
Yeah, it is.
Not sweet enough. It's still live. Online.
Might be a little jumbled when everybody's talking at once, but.
Yeah. We don't have an outcome to worry about. No one's gonna come. We get 60.
One of the things I kind of glossed over is. No,
That's a really good idea.
don't just read all.
I was gonna share just a little bit of information, and Scott and some of the others may even have some information to chime in. So just quickly, we did want, first official WISE meeting. And it was hosted over in Auburn. In Montgomery. We had a really good turnout. It's Allison Short, right? I'm bad with names, but Allison was there, and that young lady she's got way more energy than I've got. But she's a fiery stick of dynamite and brought a lot of energy, did a really great job. I think we had close to probably 30 people in attendance at that meeting. So really good turnout for that initial launch of WISE as part of the WISE chapter with our chapter. So super excited about that. And then I think most of you guys are aware that we recently just had a review of our Alabama chapter bylaw, and what brought that change about was the change with society. And I always forget the official name, but we don't have delegates anymore. You know the official name of that board?
Advisors or something like that. What was it? Is it like an advisory board?
Yeah, advisory board, that's it. So they've done away with the delegates. So they had to revise the society bylaws to recognize the advisory board, which then forced a review of all chapters bylaws to also. So the really only change in there, which the executive board here reviewed and voted on and approved, was the bylaws are basically identical, except for the terminology from delegates to advisory board. So we do have the new copy that I think was signed and approved by society. So we can share that.
It is on the website. You can go, well, it's better to go to the newsletter that was sent out. There's a link to see it.
Okay. So yeah, and that was the last thing I was gonna mention, is the most recent newsletter that Paul sent. He wasn't able to be with us today, but hopefully all of y'all got that newsletter. And there's the link there to the bylaws, but then Paul mentioned a couple of things which were around the maybe that's where I got confused earlier when I was talking to you, Scott, was planning around our PDC. I think that's what he mentioned in there, wasn't it? So we've got our Alabama chapter PDC that'll be coming up. I think it's April, and it'll be in Tuscaloosa. And so there's a full planning committee around that, but I think Paul's also looking to provide some input to it. So he mentioned that. What?
Region 4, sorry.
Yeah, Region 4, sorry, not the Alabama chapter, you're correct. Region 4 PDC. So Paul's newsletter talked about that a little bit. So if you have ideas and suggestions, then again, reply back to Paul, and I think he's planning some meetings around that also. I don't know if there's anything else that anybody else wanted to discuss, but that was the three major things I was gonna just bring up.
Just a reminder, social media, trying to do better about posting information, kind of reverberating, comes out with a newsletter. Like, follow Alabama ASSP on LinkedIn, also Twitter, Instagram, trying to get information out there, grow our brand here in the Alabama area. So if you have any information, anything that you want to share, get with me. We'll repost it out. We have a hashtag on LinkedIn, Alabama ASSP. We'll have to do ASSP. Tag it to that. We'll post it out. So we're steadily growing, not as fast as I want to, but every week we're adding 1 or 2, 3 or 4 folks.
Yeah, and really appreciate you doing that. You know, we all, in one way or another, seem to use social media. I can't even tell you I'm any good at it. I can read.
I can do most of dangerous. I don't know what that means, but it's not bad.
Yeah. If anybody else has anything, feel free to speak up, share.
CDT would be on April 26th and 27th.
April 26th and 27th, perfect. I need to go to it this year. I didn't go last year. So I also met different way of meeting the person, but so I met the chair. Her name Angela. I met the chair through because I'm on another committee with society with the ASSP. We had a call Wednesday or Thursday. And Angela's on that same committee. I've been on, this is my third year and I'll roll off of that committee in June. Angela's coming into it new. And when she introduced herself, she said she was the chair. And I was like, well, we need to talk. So, but anyway, so I met her, but April 26th and 27th of 2023.
That's the one that will be at Tuscaloosa.
Deal.
It's been a while since we've had one. Last one that we did have was in Tuscaloosa. You know, this is one where we really, this would be a good time to try and start bringing in more higher engagement with our chapter. We probably need that kind of help facilitating the meeting, because typically on these things we're all over. So I mean, any help we can get from Montgomery, Tuscaloosa, they'll be willing. But so that's typical of what you see with the different chapters, that sort of are the city host and these things. So it'll be a kind of an all hands affair.
Yeah.
It'll be good.
I haven't been involved in the one here. I was sharing with Scott. I was involved at Region 3's. But yeah, it's all hands on deck. If it's successful, it's because everybody gets involved and helps it.
Exactly.
So. Does anybody else have anything going on or know about?
Anyone going up to NSC? Or have anybody going out to the NSC conference next week?
All the vendors are contacting me, wanting to know if I'm gonna be there.
Trying to give away free tickets.
I'm a vendor, so I know a lot of people that are going, and I'm Scott Anthony with Master Lock, and we do have a lot of people that will be there. And a lot of people are going. I'm glad to see that, I think the governor's conference might have been a good sign that, you know, people are starting to get more involved in shows, and you're starting to see people again. And so I'm excited to see that from a vendor standpoint.
Are there, I'm gonna ask just because, and I'm so open and transparent. One of my frustration points with ASSP and society, and I'm talking to some people at the society level about it. But what is the NSC doing around COVID and protocols? Because as you guys know, ASSP still attend certain events in person. You got to prove vaccination or prove negative testing and all of that. So is NSC doing anything like that?
I haven't heard anything, anybody in the vaccination. I don't know, Wild West stuff.
Was there any
Several months back, that was a big deal. Any show that you were going to be a part of course, my vaccination, in fact, it's been in my wallet so long, you may not even be able to read it. But bottom line is, I'm noticing it shows it's starting to get, you know, as it relates to COVID. And I sit there and we were talking before we started this meeting. And I guess maybe I bragged a little too much about the fact that I'd never gotten COVID and been tested many times because of the fact that my daughter-in-law was pregnant in the heart of COVID. Well, I go to the Alabama Governor's Conference and my wife and I both got COVID. So, keep my mouth shut, but to answer your question, bottom line, I'm not seeing it as much as you did several months back.
You know, not even in other countries, you know, international travel, it's very, very few places now that require any kind of, there still are some, but not like it was even a few months ago.
Well, I hadn't contracted it at all until it was right after the first of the year, 2022. I think the first week of January, second week of January. But I tested positive. I'm still not convinced I had COVID, the way everybody describes COVID, because it started more like a typical allergy / sinus infection for me that I had, before. And, had a little tickle in my throat and a cough. Work said, we want you to go get tested. I did. It was positive. I never ran fever, had no fatigue, no symptoms. I ended up staying home only because my wife made me, but Saturday and Sunday, after testing on Friday, I felt so good that I wanted to go mountain biking. And she was like, I really don't think you should do that. And I was like, I feel great. And I stayed out of work for 5 days or 6 days, whatever they made me. And then I went back and I never suffered anything. So I don't know if I really had it. The test said I did. And that's been the only time. So.
Kind of followed the CDC guidance, and the recent guidance. The information that went with it was more the reasons we don't require anybody to wear masks. And then, they basically went into, if you do have test positive, you stay out for 5 days and then you can go back with a mask, all that stuff. But it was basically, there was a long list of things, which included, if you're gonna get a shot, you should have it already and all these other kind of things.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think we're seeing that because there's a growing sense, I think in the medical community that, COVID's gonna be around. We at some point, things are gonna have to find some happy medium where, people will still interact because it's not gonna go away. It's not gonna, it'll be around like cold and other things. Flus will probably be taking annual vaccinations. You want to try to avoid the flu, you get a flu shot. You want to try to avoid COVID, you probably get the newest of what they have to offer. So I suspect that's, a big driver for seeing that. Which, by the way, I do know of somebody else who was also a vendor at the conference who came in. Lost the taste also. Did you lose your taste?
The funny thing is, I did not lose my taste and smell maybe a little bit, but the biggest thing that I noticed, had a little bit of fever, but the dry cough and how tired or fatigued. A day and a half to 2 days, that's the worst part. Then day 3, like you just said, I get a mountain bike, go do whatever, you're ready to go. It's those first 2 days or you notice it.
Yeah, and I didn't even feel any fatigue at all. Like I said, I had the tickle in my throat Thursday at work, and I woke up Friday with a little bit of a cough. And just my concern of not going to work Friday and ended up getting tested was I didn't want to spread it if it was, right? So I called in and did the right thing, and then they said, well, go get tested. So I did. They said I was positive. But I told my wife, I said, if that's the I think it was 19 before COVID hit, I contracted the flu right before the ASSP conference in New Orleans, if I've got my year right. And we were traveling to Chicago and Indiana for a family reunion, and then going from that all the way to New Orleans for the conference. And I ended up testing positive for the flu. Now the flu kicked my rear, and I was like, if what I had was COVID, I was like, nothing, right? The flu was what kicked my rear.
Now, like I was saying, my wife had it, we both got it at the governor's conference, and her symptoms were much worse. And from a body aching standpoint, and to me, it kind of seems like a female, it more related towards females with the joint pain, because my mother got it this week as well. And the only reason she's decided to test at home is because my wife didn't comment about the joints hurting. My mother was the same way, which also something that I found out last week. Y'all may or may not know this, but For most insurances, if you go by CVS, they will give you 8 free home tests a month. Wow. Keep at home. You have to go by there. They say they have to write a prescription, which is strange to me, but they write it up. You either stay there and wait, or you come back the next day and get it. They'll give you 8 free ones. Good to have around the house. If you think, I mean, but I found it out last week, had not heard that.
We're
I think
still,
it's send around the free ones. I've still got mine. I check and see if they're still, the shelf life might be expired.
we have a shelf life. Yeah, we're still tracking, we've still got groups. It's not the kind of war room that was a year and a half, 2 years ago, thank heaven. The group is still tracking all of our cases, and what you just described right now is typical. We're still seeing people that get some kind of minor symptoms and they test positive. You know, tell them to follow the current guidance and stay home for a couple of days. But it's been, thankfully, thank you, good Lord, it's been well over a year since we've had any really significant, anybody in the hospital, because early on, we had multiple hospitalizations. Actually had 2 employees that at one point in time were on ventilators. And interesting, one of those folks has turned into a true, what they call the long haul COVID cases, where he's continuing to have significant respiratory issues and stuff, and it's been 2 years ago now.
We have 1 or 2 of those ourselves that they call long-term COVID effect or whatever. No,
Yeah,
I'm like you here recently. We haven't had any.
all of our cases for a year now have been either completely asymptomatic or very, very minor, a day or 2, they're 100% again.
You guys do any proactive testing or
I'll do what?
are you doing reactive testing, proactive testing, or are you doing more?
At this point in time, it's just testing. We're not really doing any testing from potential close contact exposures like we were doing a couple of years ago, contact tracing, all that stuff, but it's all reactive. Somebody that's symptomatic or somebody that feels like they might be sick, they will have.
Well, it's my hope that, my office is in my house, and I travel. And it's that hopefully somebody will use their head in that if they think they have it, they wouldn't come to something like this. And you just hope people just don't create a situation. Pause. Bottom line.
It's the age-old common sense rule. If you're sick, stay home.
Exactly.
Almost, it doesn't really matter what kind of illness.
Exactly.
COVID is one of them, but
If you're sick, stay home.
40% that's asymptomatic, they want to. Just never know.
That's why it's gonna continue to just be, it's so difficult to really wrap your arms around what is and isn't,
Well, that was huge. And I'm not trying to create controversy with my comment, but that's one of the things that's been so confusing to me about ASSP and their conferences. And the one that really got my attention was when they moved it to Austin, which was, I believe, 2021, September 2021, they held Society's conference in Austin. Then the next February, for safety focused, they moved it out of Las Vegas to Phoenix, Arizona. And in Austin, if you wanted to attend in person, you either had to be fully vaccinated or prove negative testing 48 hours prior to the event. They turned around at safety focus in February and said, the only way you could attend was to be fully vaccinated. Showing a negative test wasn't even an option. And then they went to June in Chicago and they went back to fully vaccinated or 48 hours negative testing. And so I've sent several emails to society trying to understand, and then exactly to this discussion. I think it's going to be around for a while, and I think you're going to keep seeing it. And there's I don't even think there's enough scientific evidence, not that I'm the doctor or the expert, but I don't think there's enough evidence to say that even if I test negative 48 hours to the event, doesn't mean that I won't go to the event and potentially spread it. And so,
I mean, we're coming into the peak of flu season. Are they gonna mandate everybody has a flu shot?
right,
They gotta- I mean, it's here to stay. We're gonna have to learn how to live with it.
Yeah, I think a lot of these organizers, these conference organizers, when they're thrashing with that question, they'll say, well, what, does the city itself have a policy? You know, what's, you know, what do they specify? You know, a lot of times they're looking for some kind of guidance, something that they can hang there. It's like, oh, they're not requiring anything. That's kind of why we're not doing it. You know, we're just following the official guidance on it. And the official guidance just bounces around, you know, like a pinball. So I think to a certain extent that kind of drives the, why this here, why that there, just, you know, there doesn't seem to be much.
but contradicts exactly what we do for a living. So we should be doing the right thing based on something. So, but anyway, well, hey, one other thing we almost forgot. How many of these you got?
Actually, believe it or not, in all these years, I only have one.
Well,
So now I have a match
I
set.
could have two. So anyway,
Thank you.
we appreciate you coming and
Absolutely.
sharing your presentation, and
Absolutely.
now you have two.
Thank you.
Those are nice cups, though.
They are.
Yeah, we're.
Since we don't have, what do you call them? Our representative that go to call.
Advisement or something like that.
Greg was like.
Oh, okay.
Get a hold of Greg, if he's active with the society, I haven't seen him once.
Yeah, he's been real busy.
Yeah, he's been real busy. See if his wife can still do those.
Well, the place where they got them done, I would imagine they still have the design probably in
Yeah.
their system. Wasn't that long ago we had it made up.
Yeah.
We could probably get more done.
Yeah, and we could also, just an idea, not to change too much, but we could also flip flop and order 50-50 of cups or some sort of Yeti mug or something, and then let people choose which one they want.
Yeah, and you know, I think we ordered.
Some people don't drink coffee, so maybe they want a cold beverage cup. I don't know.
12 dozens, something like that. It covers a couple years.
What made me think of that was Allison, because she had tumblers with the Wise logo on them, and they were really nice looking, and they were asking questions in the room of how long people have been members, et cetera, and I won one of the cups, which I declined and let them give to somebody else, but I didn't know what they were giving away. They just said a cup, and then when I saw the tumbler, I was like, oh man, that was nice. But no, it was, they did, whoever she got those from did a nice job on them, had the Wise logo on it, and a tumbler with, you know, that Alabama logo would look really sharp.
Yeah, it would look good.
We would give it like a pop. Here now, so we could change.
Yeah.
Or something.
Like, up the road.